Today is Friday, August 22nd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. President Trump gets a major win in court. We'll have that top news story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. You can subscribe and leave a rating. That would be greatly appreciated if you could do that. It helps our podcast get noticed by more folks. And you can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're glad you're here with us as we are going through all of the news of the day each and every weekday. Bright and early, we're here. And here with me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, we've got an update on the focus story here with this student battling her school over a Bible verse.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. Sabrina Steffens, she has won her battle. We'll get into all the details. The school district has backed down, and we'll have all that for you today.
Great update there. We'll look forward to the details coming up in just a moment. Also, on the main thing, in China, there are some disturbing reports going on of ongoing organ harvesting, forced abortion, sterilizations. CBN's Gary Lane has more on that update coming up on the main thing. All right, make sure you're checking out all of our CBN News podcasts. As always, you can find the links to those right there in the description of this episode. And you can follow us on Substack as well, faithwire.substack.com. We are growing a community of believers there to pray through the news of the day. We'd love it if you're there with us. You can comment, interact with everybody else there on that Substack as you pray through the things that are going on in the world today. So join that community, faithwire.substack.com. And we're going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. A New York appeals court has tossed out the massive $500 million civil fraud penalty against President Trump, ruling the fine was excessive and violated the Constitution's ban on excessive punishment. The judgment was originally $464 million, but ballooned to over $515 million with interest. And it stemmed from Attorney General Letitia James's claim that Trump inflated his wealth to secure favorable loans and insurance deals. While the fine was struck down, the court did uphold restrictions banning Trump and his sons from running a New York company for several years and kept in place oversight of the Trump organization's business dealings. Trump, who had posted a $175 million bond during the appeal, blasted the case as a political witch hunt, while his allies are now calling for James to resign. And one of the most influential voices in American Christianity, Dr. James Dobson, has passed away at the age of 89. The best-selling author and advisor to 5 U.S. presidents, Dobson dedicated his life to strengthening marriages, defending biblical values, and equipping parents to raise godly children. In 1977, he launched the Focus on the Family radio program, which eventually reached 220 million listeners in 150 countries. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories at cbnnews.com. And Billy, what a legacy Dr. Dobson leaves. And I mean, he obviously became a major leading cultural voice for traditional marriage and for family. He would often warn that America's foundation depends on strong homes. And no lies detected. He's absolutely right on that. And what a worthy endeavor to point people to Christ, but doing it through the context largely of family, which is the bedrock of society here, you know, for a functioning society.
Yeah, no, he really was phenomenal. And his impact, I saw even Ben Shapiro and others, you know, even people outside of the Christian realm recognizing his impact. And the job that we have, you and I, you know, having done this for a while now, you know, you think back to the different people when we lose them, in this case, who we've interviewed. You know, I've done numerous interviews with Dr. Dobson, and I was thinking, gosh, you know, I'd love to go back and hear those interviews. So much wisdom. Obviously, what he said about the family being the centerpiece, the fact that the family has disintegrated so much, that was something he fought against and tried to help so many families. And so just you think about legacy, a legacy for the Lord, that's the most important one you can have. He certainly had that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the two things, when you have radical activists, especially leftist activists who want to upend America and they want to transform it into something else, something more progressive, something more socialist or communist even, What is the number one thing all of the patriarchs of the communist movement, what do they all say? How do you attack it? How do you dismantle American capitalism and American faith and American society and Western society? And the way to do that is by dismantling the family. Why do you think you see so many perverted forms of family being pushed on and foisted on culture? That is one of the primary reasons for it. There might be kind of quote unquote useful idiots who don't understand and they just latch onto it. But the people pushing this stuff, many of them you'll find, if you look them up, what is their ideology? You can almost bank on it being an extremely far left ideology. And so it's the family unit and then the traditional family unit. And then of course, faith in Christ. Those two things that you have to go after those first from a leftist point of view, from an extreme leftist point of view, if you want to radically transform the country. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think we've seen that again and again, and the course corrections that we're watching are very interesting. I'm very intrigued to see where this kind of goes because, you know, culture is crumbling in so many ways, and then people are building themselves back up in faith at the same time. And collectively, if enough people do that, you've got a real interesting dynamic going on that can help. Yeah, look, people like Dobson, they laid the groundwork to help others, inspire others to be bold and speak out, right? So hopefully people do that enough and come back to faith enough where we can see real change and continued change.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. All right, well, we are going to go over to the focus story now. And as we talked about there, great update here happening on the story that we've been covering here on this podcast. And Billy, this teenager who fought back after her public school wouldn't allow her to place a Bible verse on her paid parking space, where I think a lot of the students would do this. The seniors get to do this. They can put what they want on there. And she got pushback from putting a Bible verse up there. Now she's won her battle. Tell me about the update here.
Yeah, Sabrina Steffens, she is an incoming senior, and her school, she goes to a school in the Grand Island Central School District near Buffalo, New York. They have reversed course. They were given a letter, a demand letter, and it's interesting because First Liberty Institute, a religious liberty law firm, they were representing Sabrina, and Sabrina and her mother, she was denied twice, two different designs that had Bible verses and you know, religious imagery. And then the third time when the imagery wasn't there, it was just benign imagery, they said yes. Well, that didn't sit well with Sabrina and her mom. They went to First Liberty to find out, hey, are we being restricted here improperly? And First Liberty said, yes, you are. We'll represent you. And so they sent this letter off. The district could have said, no, we're not going to backtrack. And then a lawsuit would have been filed, but they did backtrack. And, you know, they did basically say, we're going to allow her to put that message on there that she wanted to put on, the initial one that she first brought to them. And so she's had a great victory here. This bold senior in high school who was willing to stand up, do media, speak out and talk about it.
How are the returnees responding now that this change of course change happened?
Yeah, so they're obviously Keisha Russell. She's senior counsel for First Liberty Institute. She said they're very pleased with the school district that they changed course and that they will allow Sabrina to truly express her deeply held beliefs in her design. She said the First Amendment protects students' private expressions of faith in public schools. You know, again, this idea that just because you're in a public school, you lose your free speech. This is not accurate, right? Every student can pick a design on their spot. If that's the design she wants to illustrate what she believes, she's allowed to do that within reason. And so they should have said yes to this. And she's, you know, the attorneys are overjoyed with the end result here.
So how's the district reacting now?
Well, you know, we always want to be fair. So I reached out to Brian Graham. He's the superintendent of Grand Island Central School District. And he actually sent a statement to CBN News and he explained the district's stance. He said, look, the district wants to foster an inclusive environment that respects the rights and dignity of all students. He talked about the fact that they take it seriously to uphold constitutional principles, including the First Amendment. Now, this part's interesting. He said, while we strongly dispute any assertion that our policies or decisions violated the rights of any student, the Board of Education and district leadership, after careful consultation with legal counsel, that's when the bells go off, have decided that the student in question will be permitted to proceed with her original senior parking space design. He also said that they're going to take some time in the coming months to review the future of the senior parking space program, and they'll consider whether adjustments to guidelines or practices are warranted to better reflect their goals as a public school community. So either that means they're going to reassess this and see whether or not they need to more clearly have a policy that doesn't create a situation like this? Or part of me wondered, are they going to not allow the design anymore of those spots? Yeah.
That is likely. I mean, the likely outcome is going to be like, here, you can choose between a flower, a sunset, or a rainbow. You know, like it's going to be something like that, where you get these really benign. So, of course, a rainbow wouldn't be benign, of course, these days. But but it sure sounds like that when they went and consulted with their lawyers, the lawyers were like, yeah, you're going to spend all this money on this case if it goes to court, and you're going to lose. So it sounds like to me they put it in a nice way, basically that we don't agree with this, but our lawyers said we're going to lose, so we went ahead and bit the bullet here.
Yeah. He did talk about school resources, that, you know, it would be distracting to the district if they had to go to litigation. So yeah, absolutely. It sounds like that's what happened here. But look, they made the right call. And
listen, the thing at the beginning, they should have just let it go. No one would know about this. Absolutely no one would know about this. And the whole argument, because Madison, when she first kind of brought this story to the podcast, she'd mentioned some of the arguments that the school gave at the time at the outset, saying, well, if we allow this Bible verse, then the Satanists would come in and they could put a Satan on there. And it's like, that is a low key sort of, what do you call it? A passive aggressive, subtle jab, not so subtle jab at Christianity by comparing it to Satan. And clearly you can just use some common sense, right? There are a lot of Christians in our country. In fact, there's millions and millions and millions of them. So this is not a shocking thing that somebody would want a Bible verse. Now, you can then say, have rules like, well, listen, we're not going to put the embodiment of evil on there. Like if you put an image of somebody shooting someone in the face or something like that, you would, or a KKK image or something, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. Clearly you'd be, listen, we're not trying to, but putting a scripture verse just because some people aren't Christians is, you know, it's ridiculous that you would even consider this to be in the same category as Satanism or some other forms of hate. It's just, it's frustrating, but this is the landscape that we're in right now. But I'm glad they won this round here.
Yeah, no, it's a good conclusion, and it's important that students speak up and stand up, because this won't happen to somebody else then, right? So that's why I think these cases are truly important ones.
Yeah, I mean, the more legal wins you rack up here, I mean, First Liberty has got to have a pretty good track record here on some of these cases that we've covered. Usually it ends up in something like this, where the other side backs down because they don't have legal standing. It's more of just a personal preference on their end. So the more of these legal wins Christians stack up, the better. Because hopefully people will just stop trying to test the waters here on this and stop trying to silence Christians in their expressions of their beliefs. All right, Billy, appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. Great update. Thanks for getting it. And we're going to head to the main thing now, in organ harvesting, forced abortions, sterilizations. The U.S. says China is committing genocide. CBN's Gary Lane speaks with East Turkistan's Foreign Minister Salih Hudayar with more.
Mr. Foreign Minister, it's good to talk with you again. Not so good about what's happening to your people at the hands of the Chinese government. So bring us up to date. How does this year's State Department report differ from previous years?
Unfortunately, the report doesn't differ much in the fact that the genocide is still ongoing and has been ongoing for the past 11 years, starting in 2014. However, the latest report does confirm that the genocide is ongoing. It includes the fact that China is continuing to mass intern Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. Many of them are now being given official, prison sentences. Millions of Uyghurs continue to be used as slave labor through Chinese corporations and factories across both East Turkestan and across China. And then it also highlights that the Chinese government is expanding its organ harvesting industry, especially targeting political prisoners and Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. And it also highlights that China is also engaging in transnational repression of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples across the globe, including here in the United States.
And it was during Trump's first term that then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo officially labeled the human rights violations against the Uyghur people as genocide. So how important was that step and the administration's determination to continue the designation? And what does that mean to the Uyghur people?
Well, it was a very important step because it was the first time that the international community, especially led by the United States, acknowledged the suffering of our people and the scale of the atrocities that our people faced. It led to similar designations by over a dozen European parliaments, Western parliaments, as well as a report by even a designation by the United Nations Human Rights Office, which stated that it was crimes against humanity. The importance of this designation is very important in, one, calling out China's atrocities, but also trying to seek accountability and justice for our people. And even after this designation, the latest development is that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security further expanded the enforcement of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is a very positive step in the right direction. The DHS added steel, copper, lithium, and other goods presumed to be made with Uyghur forced or slave labor from coming into the United States. So this is going to be subjecting these goods that are coming from China to intense scrutiny at U.S. ports and customs and border protection.
Well, I was going to say, what good is a designation unless it's backed up by action? And it looks like there's some movement in that direction. And genocide would mean the Chinese are specifically attempting to exterminate the Uyghur race. So what are they doing on that front? Forced abortion, intermarriage, what?
Yes, so the Chinese government is, according to experts on organ harvesting, they estimate that 25,000 to 50,000 Uyghur youth are being killed every year for their organs. So this is the killing part. The Chinese government also has forcibly sterilized hundreds of thousands of Uyghur women. Their own official data shows that they, quote, prevented the births of 3.7 million Uyghur and other Turkic babies over the past several decades. The Chinese government also has forcibly separated over 1 million Uyghur and other Turkic children from their families, putting them up into what they call so-called orphanages or boarding schools. But if you look at the satellite imagery data and the few images that journalists who were able to get somewhere near it were able to take, it's essentially internment camps for children. And you see Chinese social media posts in which they are brainwashing these children, dressing up these Uyghur children in, miniature People's Liberation Army uniforms, and, indoctrinating them with Chinese nationalism and loyalty, and separating them from all of their, traditional, ethnic, cultural, and religious heritage.
Salih Hudayar, Foreign Minister of the East Turkestan Government in Exile, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
All right, Gary, appreciate that update. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast this week for one last thing.
We've got 2 Corinthians 3:12. Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. A reminder that our hope in Christ gives us the boldness we need to live our everyday lives, but to also stand up and fight when we need to do it, and fight in a way that honors the Lord.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Our family Bible study, we've been going through Daniel right now and just reading about how Daniel stood up and he did not bow down to the king's demands to only pray to the king, and because he trusted God, and we should do the same. We have a great God who's always going to win, no matter what the outcome here is on this side of eternity. All right, Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here with more on Monday. God bless. Have a great weekend.